Hey everybody, this is Cheryl from Kingston and Clarendon. I'm coming to you from my sewing room today to share with you my first ever instructional video. I wanted to share the details of how I created this self-drafted shirt. So I did a little bit of a tutorial on the section of pin tucks that I created for the center. So the entire shirt was created from a bodice block that I drafted for myself and did a whole bunch of alterations to it. But this video will just focus on the technique that I use to create the pin tucks. And it's my first ever video, so there are just a little bit of issues with the focus, but I think that there's enough detail there that you'll be able to understand the technique that I'm showing you. Anyway, I hope everybody's having a great weekend and that you enjoy the video. All right, bye. Okay, so what I've done here is I have lined up the selvage with one of the straight lines on my cutting mat, and that helps me to know that I am setting up the fabric pretty straight. If you don't have a cutting mat, no need to worry about it. What you can do is just set a straight line parallel to your selvage. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drop a line in that will be the seam allowance. Now typically I wouldn't put the selvage in the seam allowance because selvages aren't particularly stable parts of the fabric, but just for the sake of time and because it doesn't really matter, I'm going to go ahead and just pretend that I'm using this as a seam allowance. Now, because I want each fold of each tuck to lay at the edge of the next tuck, I will be taking the size of the tucks that I want. So I want about a 1/2 inch tuck and then multiplying that by 3. So that means that I need my fold line to be 1.5 inches from each other. So what we'll do here is we will use the quilting ruler again, and I will place it 1.5 inches away from the line that I just drew. The other thing that you'll notice I did is I did tape down the fabric so that way it doesn't shift too much when I am drawing my lines. So I'll go ahead and draw in a line at 1.5 inches, and this will be the fold line. So then I'll pick up the ruler again and place it so that way the next line is 1.5 inches from the previous one, and we'll draw another line. As you can see, because I am taking up 1.5 inches with each of these, this actually uses up quite a bit of fabric. So if you are incorporating tucks into a pattern piece, you do have to account for how much more extra fabric you are going to need, because this will take up a whole lot of fabric. You'll see once we sew this all together that the pattern piece is actually going to shrink up quite a bit. The reason why I have this L-shaped ruler here is this is another way that you can also mark. So if you have your L-shaped ruler here, you have it parallel to the selvage, and you can place it on the fabric, and then you can also use that to help mark off your parallel lines. So that's another handy dandy tool that you can use. But I do happen to just love the clear quilting ruler. This is one of the favorite tools in my sewing room. So we will have one last line over here. That's all that can fit on this odd shaped piece of fabric that I used. So I don't know if you can see the lines too well, but we have some parallel lines here. And what we'll be doing is we'll be folding the fabric along each of these lines. And that's why it's so important that they're straight, and then sewing a 1/2 inch away from the fold line. So I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine, and I'll show you what that looks like. So what I'll be doing from here is I will be taking each fold line and setting it to a 1/2 inch away from my needle and sewing straight down the entire length of this fabric. So the key is to make sure that you're right on the fold line so that way everything stays straight. And then we'll do the next one. And you want to be pretty precise with this because that's how you'll get nice, crisp, parallel tucks. And of course, when you're sewing this, you would go ahead and use a matching thread, but because I want you to be able to see what I'm doing, I am doing a contrasting thread. So this is what it looks like from the front before it's pressed. You can see that you can still see all of the fold marks, but those will disappear with heat because I used a special type of pen that will disappear once you apply heat to it. And then this is what it looks like from the back. So you can tell that I did a pretty decent job of maintaining the lines parallel and straight and evenly spaced. So I have just taken this to the ironing board and pressed all of the tucks to one side. So you can tell that, you know, I did a pretty good job. It's not entirely perfect, but they're all, you know, fairly parallel and evenly spaced. And again, I use the contrasting thread in order to help you see. Now, if you want to add a little bit more texture and create a different type of effect, you can also stitch perpendicular to the tucks and do some folds so that way you can have a little bit more interest. So we'll go ahead and take a look at how that looks. So right here I am just gonna sew a straight line right across these folds. And then I am going to fold the tucks in the other direction. So it'll be easier if we just flip the fabric around and then take these folds over here. And I did such a good job of ironing that it is a little bit hard to do. So then we will go ahead and sew again perpendicular to the pin tucks. And so you can see that there's a wave starting to form. So I'm flipping the fabric back over and we'll do that again. And then I will flip it back over again. And I'm not looking to do any, you know, specific spacing between these perpendicular lines. This is just for the sake of showing you the technique. And so there you go, you have created some waves there. So that also will add some texture and 3D interest to any pattern piece that you have. And you can also do this for things like pillows or bags and that type of thing. So there you go.